I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A Prayer by George Washington. Almighty God, we make our earnest prayer that Thou wilt keep the United States in Thy holy protection, that Thou wilt incline the hearts of the citizens to cultivate a spirit of subordination and obedience to government, and entertain a brotherly affection and love for one another and for their fellow citizens of the United States at large. And finally, that Thou wilt most graciously be pleased to depose us all to do justice, to love mercy, and to demean ourselves with that charity, humility, and pacific temper of mind, which were the characteristics of the divine author of our blessed religion, without a humble imitation of whose example in these things we can never hope to be a happy nation. Grant our supplication, we beseech Thee, through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Throughout history, many stories have been labeled conspiracy theories. The term was allegedly first used in 1863 by Charles Astor Bristed in a letter to the editor of the New York Times. Bristed used the term to describe claims that British aristocrats were weakening the United States during the American Civil War. The term has been used repeatedly to discredit dissenting opinions and has been used in newspapers since the 19th century. The term generally carries a derogatory connotation and implies the story is false and that the believer is irrational. And this brings me to a more modern example. How ironic that there is a conspiracy theory that the CIA invented the term conspiracy theory to discredit people who criticized the CIA's handling of the Kennedy assassination. Maybe they didn't invent it, but it is possible that they revived it. What happened on that day in Texas remains one of the most contentious mysteries of our time, setting off a hailstorm of criticism and endless conspiracy theories, leading to many people on a search for the truth. Critics say their theories are absurd, and that they should expect mockery and criticism, to which one particular investigator responds, quote, "Why, of course we are, but then again, those people don't know anything about firearms, ballistics, or bullet performance," end quote. Now, a second investigator is taking a look at the case. Let's discuss what they and others have uncovered about that fateful day in Dallas. First, let's go over the undisputed facts. The president traveled to Dallas on a routine trip along his campaign trail. It was a beautiful November day. The sun was shining, the crowd was excited, and the top on the presidential limousine was down. At 12:30 p.m., shots rang out in Dealey Plaza. President Kennedy is mortally wounded, and Texas Governor John Connally is seriously injured. Both are rushed to Parkland Hospital nearby. Half an hour later, President Kennedy is pronounced dead. Just 45 minutes later, the suspected killer would allegedly murder a police officer before being apprehended, brought in, and charged. Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested in Dallas in a movie theater. President Kennedy's body was flown to Washington for the autopsy, and Vice President Lyndon Johnson took the oath of office on board the presidential plane. 2 days later, Jack Ruby shoots and kills Oswald in an underground parking lot. The following day, the president is laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery. Those are the uncontested facts. What happens beyond this has been scrutinized for decades. In response to suspicion that Lee Harvey Oswald was part of a greater criminal plot, President Johnson appoints Supreme Court Chief Justice Earl Warren to investigate. Over the next 10 months, in closed court sessions, 552 witnesses gave their testimony to the Warren Commission, resulting in an 888-page report to the public. And 60 years later, the murder of JFK is still shrouded in suspicion, mystery, and conspiracy theories. Most Americans still don't believe Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone gunman. Many people have tried to crack this case over the years, but no career detectives had ever done a cold case study of forensic analysis of all the evidence, all the testimony, until Colin McLaren, an Australian detective, who decided to take on the historic case. Others have also questioned publicly the Warren Commission findings, including CBS, who in 1967 put the findings to the test. CBS News had a tower and a target track constructed to match exactly the heights and distances in Dealey Plaza. The target was a standard FBI target silhouette, moved by an electric motor at 11 miles per hour, approximately the speed of the presidential limousine. 11 volunteer marksmen took turns firing clips of 3 bullets each at the moving target. The purpose was to ascertain if it was physically possible to fire 3 rounds on target in 5.6 seconds, or less, using the antiquated Mannlicher Carcano bolt-action rifle that Lee Harvey Oswald was said to have used. The Warren Commission findings' credibility rested on this test. In the end, only one man would be able to accomplish this task, a weapons engineer, and he had the best score at 3 hits in 5.2 seconds. His name was Howard Donahue. It takes Donahue 3 tries, but thanks to his efforts, CBS concludes that it is possible to fire the 3 shots on target in less than 5.6 seconds. Surprisingly, the best marksman of the day was a ballistics expert, and due to this experiment, would become one of the loudest voices denouncing the Warren Commission's findings. Donahue's quest to re-examine the JFK assassination forms the basis of Colin McLaren's modern forensic investigation. Donahue is no conspiracy theorist, but what he feels he uncovers is a terrible secret, long hidden from the American people. Donahue's appearance on CBS launched him into an obsession. He never believed Oswald could have shot those 3 shots in 5.6 seconds. He was a highly decorated bomber pilot in World War II. He was an avid hunter, qualified as an expert marksman, had a gun shop, was a gunsmith, and an expert witness for the courts. After the CBS special airs, True Magazine tasks Donahue to look into the Warren Commission findings and write an article based on what he finds. Donahue decides to use his expertise to examine the ballistics, the trajectory of the shots, the bullet performance, and the wounds caused. He focuses on each of the 3 shots. The commission claimed the first shot hit President Kennedy at the base of his neck, just to the right of his spine, exited his throat below the Adam's apple, struck Governor Connally beneath and behind his right armpit, shattered 4 inches of Connally's 5th rib, exited below his right nipple, and crashed through his right wrist, before finally lodging 2 inches deep in Connally's left thigh. For many critics of the Warren Commission, the 2 men's position in the presidential limo rule out the single bullet theory. Critics find it preposterous that a bullet slanting down from the right rear of the president could pierce his throat, make a sharp right turn, and enter the extreme right side of Connally's back. Initially, Donahue's inclined to agree that the Commission's single bullet theory is improbable. Then he discovers that Connally and his wife Nellie are riding in jump seats. These seats were not in a direct line with the president and Jackie's places in the back seat of the limousine. The jump seats were closer to the center of the car, and much lower than the bench seats the Kennedys rode in, which means that Governor Connally was sitting much lower and farther inboard than it appeared. Donahue places Connally where he was actually sitting, with his body turned. The bullet's trajectory lines up perfectly. To Donahue, the slug's seemingly impossible dogleg turn now makes perfect sense. Donahue makes an amazing discovery. He proves that the Warren Commission's often ridiculed single bullet theory is in fact correct, despite the fact that the Commission got the shot trajectory completely wrong. But another inconsistency in the findings continues to puzzle Donahue. The critics argue that the bullet that hit Kennedy and Connally was too pristine to have ripped through 2 men. Coincidentally, a bullet was found at Parkland Hospital, which was considered likely to have been from Governor Connally. It was found on a stretcher, and the bullet was relatively intact, and critics wondered how a bullet could have gone through 2 men and caused so many wounds and not been damaged. Donahue went to the National Archives and looked at the bullet himself, with a jeweler's loupe, and to his trained eye found that the bullet was deformed. The contention that the bullet was perfect was a fallacy. It convinced Donahue even further that the Warren Commission was correct about the single bullet theory. But did the bullet match the gun? Firearms expert FBI agent Robert Frazier answered that question before the commission, claiming that the bullet was delivered to him at the FBI lab, that he examined it, and concluded that it had been fired from Oswald's Carcano rifle. The marks on the bullet matched the chamber of Oswald's rifle. Donahue agrees the single bullet struck the two men, but wondered if that was actually the first shot, based on Connolly's frequent public disagreements with this key finding. Connolly stated publicly, quote, "I'm convinced beyond any doubt that I was not struck by the first bullet. I know that I heard the first shot, that I turned to my right to see what was happening. Seeing nothing, I was in the process of turning to my left, and I was struck by a second shot. The third shot struck the president, but it did not strike me. Now, as I said earlier, this testimony was presented to the Warren Commission, but they chose to disagree with my interpretation and my memory of what had occurred." End quote. Donahue discovers that the testimony of senior Secret Service agent Roy Kellerman also contradicts the Commission's order of shots. Roy Kellerman was riding in the front seat of the limo. He described what he heard after the first shot. Quote, "There was a report like a firecracker, pop, and as I turned my head to the right, to view whatever it was or see whatever it was, I heard a voice from the back seat, and I firmly believe it was the president, saying, 'My God, I'm hit.' And I turn around and he's got his hand up like this," end quote, indicating his right hand up toward his neck. How could Kennedy have said anything if the first bullet had gone through his throat? And if the first shot didn't strike the president, where did it go? Many witnesses testified they saw the first shot hit the pavement and ricochet off. Virgie Ray was a bookkeeper at the book depository. In her Warren Commission statement, she says she saw a bullet bouncing off the roadway. She was standing directly in front of the book depository and stated, quote, "Well, after he passed us, then we heard a noise, and I thought it was firecrackers, because I saw a shot or something hit the pavement. I thought it was a firecracker. It looked just like you could see the sparks from it." End quote. Was it a fragment that hit Kennedy, causing him to exclaim, quote, "My God, I've been hit," end quote, before being shot in the neck by the second bullet? Donahue believes so, putting him now at odds with the Warren Commission, believing they were wrong about the order of the first two shots. Next, Donahue sets his sights on the third bullet. Dr. James Humes was the pathologist in charge at Bethesda Naval Hospital. He conducts the president's autopsy just a few hours after the assassination. When Humes testified before the Warren Commission, he was asked to detail the damage that the third bullet had inflicted, to which he stated, quote, "The third obvious wound at the time of the examination was a huge defect over the right side of the skull. This defect involved both the scalp and the underlying skull, and the brain substance protruding." End quote. According to Hume's testimony, the wound extended 10 to 12 centimeters back to front, from just behind the president's ear to above his hairline. This wound is a total mystery. One bullet pierces the bodies of two men and emerges in one piece. Yet the bullet that struck Kennedy in the head explodes in a hail of lead. Why did these bullets perform so differently? Humes is quoted as saying, quote, "I will refer back to the X-rays which we had previously prepared. These disclosed to us multiple minute fragments of radio-opaque materials. These tiny fragments were seen dispersed throughout the substance of the brain." End quote. When asked about how many fragments were observed on the X-ray, Humes testified, quote, "I would say between 30 and 40 dust-like particle fragments." End quote. Donahue contends, "This is not the work of a full metal jacket bullet. This seems more likely the work of a frangible bullet that is designed to explode violently upon impact." Donahue has concluded that the bullet that struck Kennedy in the head isn't consistent with the ammunition used in Oswald's rifle. He then focuses his attention on the size of the entrance wound in Kennedy's skull. According to the autopsy report, the diameter of the entrance wound is 6 millimeters, and the bullet tunnels for 15 millimeters before fragmenting. Oswald's Carcano bullets are 6.5 millimeters in diameter. If the shot had come from Oswald's Carcano rifle, the entrance wound in JFK's skull would have to be at least that diameter or bigger. If the entrance wound is only 6 millimeters in diameter, it's simply impossible for a 6.5 millimeter Carcano bullet to have impacted JFK's skull. Donahue concludes that the kill shot was caused by an exploding frangible bullet from another weapon. If so, why were there 3 spent Carcano shells found at Oswald's sniper perch? Donahue explains that, as one of the casings was found a short distance away from the other 2, that it's probable that Oswald used the damaged casing lying by itself as a chamber plug to keep out dust and moisture from getting into the chamber. Donahue believes evidence at the scene indicates that Oswald ejected this plug before taking the sniper position at the window, making it compelling evidence that Oswald only shot 2 shots. So if the fatal shot didn't come from Oswald, where did it come from? Donahue focuses on the trajectory of the 3rd shot. The Warren Commission calculated that the headshot came down at a declination of just under 16 degrees down and about 6 degrees right to left, based on the midline of the vehicle. Donahue conducts his own trajectory tests. He uses the Warren Commission autopsy exhibits to examine the bullet's entrance and exit points. He uses a dummy head and drills the exit hole in hopes to trace the line of trajectory back to its source. Donahue slides a dowel through the skull to line up the trajectory with the position of President Kennedy's head at the time of the 3rd shot. He determines that the shot was fired from behind Kennedy, but from a much lower angle than the 6th floor window of the depository. Donahue was stunned at his findings. He now believes it was impossible for the final shot to have come from Oswald. Seeking answers, Donahue meets with pathologist Dr. Russell Fisher, Maryland's chief medical examiner. Fisher has been appointed by the Attorney General to re-examine JFK's autopsy, and he revealed startling new information about the president's head wound. Dr. Fisher told Donahue that the entrance wound was mislocated, and that it was actually about 4 inches higher than the previously reported. Armed with this new information, Donahue redoes the trajectory experiment. He got out his drawings of the cars and passengers, traced the line of trajectory back, and found that it went over the left rear seat of the Secret Service follow-up car that contained a number of agents riding closely behind the presidential limousine. Donahue writes to the Secret Service and asks for the names of the agents who rode in the follow-up car, what weapons they were carrying, and what caliber those weapons are. Secret Service replied they don't disclose the type of weapons they use, other than every agent is issued a .38 caliber revolver. The letter adds that the Secret Service agents fired no shots at the time of the assassination. But there was evidence from the form of witnesses that there may have been gunfire at street level. 10 eyewitnesses claim to have smelled gunpowder at the time of the shooting at street level. Dallas patrolman Earl Brown is standing on a railway bridge, looking down at the motorcade as it races to Parkland Hospital, and he's quoted as saying, quote, "I heard those shots, then I smell this gunpowder. It came on, I'd say, a couple of minutes later or so, at least it smelled like it to me." End quote. Mayor Earl Coble's wife, who was in a convertible 4 cars behind the president's limo, testified that she, quote, "turned around to say, 'Earl, that was a shot,' and just as soon as I got the words out, the 2 second shots rang out. I was acutely aware of an odor of gunpowder." End quote. Senator Ralph Yarborough was riding with Vice President Johnson in an open Lincoln behind the Secret Service follow-up car. Yarborough was a war veteran with over 50 years' experience with firearms. He's quoted as saying, quote, "I've hunted all my life, and I've handled all kinds of weapons in the Army. I knew they were rifle shots, and there were 3 of them. Second or 2 later, I smelled gunpowder. I always found that strange. Being familiar with firearms, I could never see how I could smell the powder from a rifle in that high building. You don't smell gunpowder unless you're upwind of it, and it blows in your face." End quote. Other eyewitnesses make even more shocking claims about a rifle somewhere within the presidential motorcade. 22-year-old Hugh Betzner claimed that he, quote, "heard at least 2 shots fired and that he saw a man in either the president's car or the car behind his pull out what looked like a rifle." End quote. Senator Ralph Yarborough stated that he saw a Secret Service agent pull out a rifle. Quote, "I heard 3 shots, no more. All seemed to come from the right rear. Some of the Secret Service men looked backwards and to the right in the general direction of where the explosion seemed to come from. One Secret Service man, sitting in the car ahead of us, pulled out an automatic weapon or rifle, and he looked backwards." End quote. Mayor Earl Coble claimed, quote, "I heard the shots. It was a long pause between the first and second shots than there was between the second and third shots." End quote. He also claimed, quote, "One Secret Service agent appeared out of nowhere with a submachine gun." End quote. Even Secret Service agent Winston Lawson testified that he saw a fellow agent holding a rifle, saying, quote, "But I also noted right after the reports an agent standing up with an automatic weapon in his hand, and the first thing that flashed through my mind was that he had fired, because this was the only weapon I had seen up until this point." End quote. Only one camera catches the agent at the scene with the rifle in his hands. The agent is mentioned several times in the Warren Commission. Donahue finds a passage that describes an Agent Hickey with an AR-15 pointing it aimlessly around the plaza. An AR-15 would fire the kind of ammo that Donahue believes hit President Kennedy in his head, that ruptures and causes massive damage. Donahue found that there were witnesses who could place the AR in the hands of George Hickey, two of which placed the weapon in his hands at the time of the third shot. Another witness claims to have seen an officer swinging around what he described as a machine gun. The Baltimore Sun decided to run Donahue's story as a two-part article enumerating all of his discoveries except the name of the agent he believed to have shot President Kennedy. George Hickey was a 40-year-old who had started the Secret Service only 4 months previous to the fatal day in Dealey Plaza. He was attached to the garage. He was to polish the cars, check the oil and water, and to prepare it for the president before the motorcade. Unlike many of the Secret Service agents, Hickey was not out getting drunk the night before. George Hickey and other Secret Service agents are asked in the following days to write a report. George Hickey stated, quote, "The last shot seemed to hit his head and cause a noise at the point of impact, which made him fall forward to his left again. At the end of the last shot, I reached to the bottom of the car, picked up the AR-15 rifle, cocked and loaded it, stood part way up in the car, and looked about. At this point, the cars are passing under the overpass, and as a result, we had left the scene of the shooting. I kept the AR-15 ready as we proceeded to the high rate of speed to the hospital." End quote. 11 different witnesses say very clearly that he had hold of the weapon around the time of the third shot, and of those 11, 7 were Secret Service agents. Sam Holland gives an entirely different account as well. He was standing at the top of the underpass at the time of the shooting. He gave Dallas Sheriff's Office a statement that claimed, quote, "After the first shot, a Secret Service man raised up in his seat with a machine gun. Then he dropped back down in the seat." End quote. Agent Roy Kellerman confirms that this weapon was in the motorcade in his Warren Commission testimony, saying, quote, "We have an AR-15. It's out of its case. It won't be shown. It could be lying on the floor, but she's ready to go." End quote. Typically meaning that the AR-15 was cocked, loaded, and had its safety on. All Hickey would have had to do was to flip the safety off, point, and shoot. But that isn't what was written in Hickey's statement. He claims that he, quote, "reached to the bottom of the car and picked up the AR-15 rifle, cocked and loaded it, and stood part way up in the car and looked about." End quote. Earl Warren confronts the Secret Service Chief James Rowley about the use of automatic rifles in the motorcade. He asks if the Secret Service has submachine guns in any of their cars. Rowley denies the presence of this, and Warren knows based on other testimony that this is just not true. Rowley evades the question, then states they, quote, "have no machine guns now." End quote. When Warren mentions the contradictory statements given by others who saw the AR-15, Rowley admits they did previously have some new weapons. So the latest weapon in the Secret Service arsenal is withdrawn immediately after the shooting of President Kennedy. The activities of the Secret Service become the most suspicious as the president's body arrives at Bethesda Naval Hospital. JFK's personal physician, George Berkeley, is also the head of Bethesda Naval Hospital and has arranged for the hospital's chief pathologist, James Humes, to perform the autopsy. Humes knows his work will be crucial for evidence for any future prosecution of the perpetrator. J. Edgar Hoover appoints 2 FBI agents to stay with the body through to embalmment. Both James Siebert and Francis O'Neill know their boss will expect a thorough report on everything that happens in the autopsy room. The medical investigators must log all forensic samples and maintain a sound chain of custody of the exhibits. The autopsy became very crowded, very noisy, and very disorganized immediately. Dr. Hume stated that it was like trying to perform delicate neurosurgery in a three-ring circus. Hume stated, quote, "The left cerebrum was disrupted by the explosive force of the missile as it entered near there. I didn't need a neuropathologist to see that the man's brain was blown. There were little tiny fragments of radio-opaque material which we thought to be bullet fragments. Very fine sort of granular-looking material. Went almost as far forward as the frontal bone." End quote. X-ray tech Gerald Custer claims to have witnessed the chaos in the room during the autopsy and saw doctors being harassed. Custer was told by his boss, Dr. Ebersol, that he was to keep his mouth shut about the autopsy and anything he witnessed. Two photographers who took 100 shots on 8 or 9 different film rolls, which would be crucial evidence, claimed that they gave the rolls to Secret Service and that they never saw the film again. They also confiscated 2 cassettes and 1 roll of brand new film. Quote, "They took every bit of film we had." End quote. The FBI records show 22 color rolls and 18 black and white rolls were taken. Their care was entrusted to the Secret Service. FBI agent Frank O'Neill recalls handing the film to Roy Kellerman. O'Neill later testified that the Secret Service had promised to forward a copy of all photographs to the FBI, but never did. The chain of evidence stops with Agent Kellerman. Dr. Humes completes the autopsy. He stores the president's brain in a stainless steel pail for further forensic analysis, but that never happens. The pathology slides that were created by Dr. Humes were handed off to the Secret Service, and he never saw those again. Shortly after the autopsy is done, Dr. Humes' boss, George Berkeley, informs him that Robert Kennedy wants his brother's brain. Humes handed it over, and nobody knows what happened to it after that. Many people were asked to sign an NDA and were threatened, if they ever spoke, that they would be court-martialed or otherwise it would be the sorriest day of their life. Detective McLaren was surprised who was not called to testify to the Warren Commission. Arlen Specter never called the 2 FBI agents assigned to the autopsy room. Specter met with the men and asked them if they had taken notes, to which they answered they had, and had turned them over to Agent Kellerman, along with all photographs and X-rays, which are never seen again. Yet in a memo written by Specter, he stated there were no notes made by the FBI agents. Gerald Custer testified that he saw 2 agents, quote, "I swear those 2 were writing a book that night." End quote. Custer provided all of his information to Specter and waited to be called to the hearing, but he never was. Senator Ralph Yarborough also prepared to be called, as he was sitting directly behind the Secret Service car. In the Commission Executive Sessions memorandum, Chief Justice Warren demanded that Yarborough be called to testify. They never called him. Nobody knows if Specter spoke to all of the agents in the follow-up car, but we do know only one gave evidence. According to Marvin Faye Chisholm, a witness, she claimed, quote, "2 men in the front car stood up, and when the second shots were fired, they all fell down, and the car took off." End quote. She was never asked to testify. Quote, "I saw a flash of pink, like someone was getting up and then sitting back down in the car. I also saw a man in either the president's car or the car behind his pull out what looked like a rifle." End quote. We will never know the answer to this. Mr. Betzner took 3 photographs that were seized and sealed, and he was never called to testify. Jean Hill was a witness who was only 6 meters away from JFK at the time of the assassination. She stated, quote, "I saw the president grab his chest and fall forward, and I think I saw a few men in plainclothes shooting back." End quote. Although allowed to testify, Jean was never pushed on why she thought that. Instead, Specter changed the subject. Sheriff Decker was in the lead car looking back towards the follow-up car. He was never called. Behind the follow-up car there were 12 vehicles. All but one had an open top. They contained press and other dignitaries, who were all facing forward. The Warren Commission only called 6, and of those 6, 4 smelled gunpowder at street level. Why wouldn't the Warren Commission call them all? In the end, Donahue and McLaren conclude the fatal shot, based on all evidence gathered, came from Agent Hickey, who accidentally shot President Kennedy from the follow-up car in the heat of the moment when the car sped forward. George Hickey has always denied being the second shooter. He even sued the publishers who published the book Mortal Error for the allegations levied against him. In the end, the publishers settled outside of court. Perhaps after all of this time, this final D-Class will answer all of our questions, once and for all. What do you think?
Always do it on my own, so I gotta get through it. And the only thing I know is to love what I'm doing. Never give up, never slow, till I finally prove it. Never listen to the no's, I just wanna keep moving. Keep my head up when I act, head up, that's a fact. Never looking back, I'ma keep myself on track. Keep my head up, staying strong, always moving on. Feel I don't belong, tell my thoughts to move along. Push myself to be the best, die with no regrets. Live with every breath, see my message start to spread. And I had so many dreams, then you hit your teens. Life ain't really what it seems, try to find out what it means. Always do it on my own, so I gotta get through it. And the only thing I know is to love what I'm doing. Never give up, never slow, till I finally prove it. Never listen to the no's, I just wanna keep moving. Yeah, I put out all this art, it's my only medicine. Yeah, everything I do, I'm just being genuine. Yeah, I'm sick of being screwed, feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah. I'm grateful, oh yeah, able, oh yeah, I'm stable, oh yeah, no label, oh yeah, you know me, I have only a path, I'm lonely, but damn, I'm going to I don't want no fake love, I want the real stuff. Everybody listen up, cause I'll only say it once. I'm gonna show you all the path, if you want it bad. I'm gonna show you where it's at, yeah, how you can get it back. Yeah, cause I ain't never done, I'll be number one. Working hella hard until I get just what I want, yeah. Rises like the sun, yeah, fatal like a gun. Shooters gonna shoot and I'm gonna shoot until I won, yeah. Always do it on my own, so I gotta get through it. And the only thing I know is to love what I'm doing. Never give up, never slow, till I finally prove it. Never listen to the no's, I just wanna keep moving. Yeah, I put out all this art, it's my only medicine. Yeah, everything I do, I'm just being genuine. Yeah, I'm sick of being screwed, feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.